Sure, I can fill in.
I'd like to welcome you to the Administration, Finance, Recreation, and Parks, Public Safety, and Public Works Committee meetings for June 11th of 2019. The purpose of this committee meetings are for the city departments to pass along information to the city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates that the city administrator is the chair of the committee meetings. By ordinance, the committee makes no formal decisions on committee matters. Rather, the items are voted to move to mayor and council meeting for consideration and vote, or staff receives guidance from the committee regarding a matter. This is a public meeting, not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during the committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7 p.m. in city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes for the Administration, Finance, Recreation, and Parks Committee meeting for May 14th of 2019. And do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Excuse me.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wilsey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyser. All in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So the first item on the agenda is for administration, and it is our special events. There's consideration of resolutions to allow scarecrows in the city of Roswell right-of-ways. And Chris
I feel like
Ward,
we've done this before.
Chris Ward will present this.
Good evening. I am requesting consideration for a resolution to allow scarecrows to be assembled in the right-of-way for the Roswell Women's Club 2019 Booyah. It will run from September 27th to November 1st.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Palermo to approve. Do we have a second?
Tough effort.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand.
We don't want to discuss it for a few minutes?
There'll be 35 scarecrows.
Okay, that's unanimous, so thank you, Ms. Ward, we appreciate that.
Exactly, yeah. That's why he ran for council, to get rid of him.
The next item on the agenda, item number 3, is discussion and consideration of changing the time of the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. This item is an initiative put on by administration to give people opportunity to come in, get the room set up, get the IT functioning. Our employees now are coming in 30 minutes early. Security is opening doors 30 minutes early to come in because we have to have them open 30 minutes before it starts. So if we move it to 9 o'clock, with staff will already be here, IT will be here, building ops will be here to get the room set up, and ComDev and Transportation, who usually has quite a few presentation items, will have time to run through those and make sure everything is set up before the meeting. So this was for your consideration this evening. Councilmember Palermo.
So, thank you for giving that background, Mr. Fisher. If there's needs around staff, so for example, the fact that someone has to come in here 30 minutes early and set up IT, what I'd like for, and I'd certainly support a policy that gives that staff member the opportunity to leave 30 minutes early that day, or some other way to work things out. But for me, ultimately, my focus is I report to the residents, and to move a committee meeting into a time when the average Roswell resident is working is something that I feel is bringing us in the wrong direction. I think this council made it tougher for residents to stay engaged and up to date when we got rid of the written minutes. Separately, we did a great thing, which is we added live streamed videos, which is fantastic. I'm very glad we did that. But then to move the meeting to a time when the average person is working is really taking away the benefit of the live stream. So now that's losing that opportunity. So I see this as really a big downside for the residents. I'm fully supportive to other policies and other things that can help staff and affect the hours, et cetera. But to move the committee meeting to when most residents are working, I feel is a big step in the wrong direction.
Thank you. Councilmember Tyser.
So, Mike, I've been thinking about Councilmember Palermo's comments, and I'm not sure. Think about this for a second. Most people start around 8 o'clock, right, if they're working, or they're commuting between 8 and 9 if they start at 9. Does this actually help them to be able to get to work or get where they're going, flip on the live stream, and see the whole meeting rather than missing the first part of it? It's just something to think about, because, maybe we can accomplish both things, right? Have it so that more people can see it, and have it so that it's, more cost effective and easier for the city.
Okay. Councilmember Henry? No.
Councilman.
Mayor Henry?
I'll just share a little history with it. Under our old committee system, we had those committee meetings during the day here at City Hall. They were much smaller meetings. They were not a committee as a whole. When we went to the whole notion of a committee as a whole, that changed things.
Sure.
And it shifted most of our work into the committees and not at council. It used to be that things would come out of committee and it would be discussed at length at a council meeting. But now that we've got the committees as a whole, we can get a lot more work done in these committees. I think they're functional. So the thought at the time was have one at 8 o'clock in the morning for folks that might be able to get away in the morning. The second one was to have it at 5 o'clock in the evening. And the whole idea behind it was so it would be conducive for our citizens to be able to attend. So I support keeping it the way it is, and I also support comp time for the employees that are changing their schedules to do this. It's 2 a month, so it's one at 5 o'clock, one at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Councilmember Claremont?
Thank you. So I just want to comment on Councilmember Tyser's questions, which I think were good questions, because I think the key is with good questions, sometimes it will help us take a different route. Other times it might just show that we thought it through in keeping on the current path. And so if we look and think about the average resident in Roswell, my theory is more of them will be working at 9 a.m. than at 8 a.m. With the 8 a.m. aspect, if they're in the car, as mentioned, if they're potentially driving to work, if they work a 9 to 5, for example, they have the ability through Bluetooth, through Apple CarPlay, whatever it might be, they can actually listen to it in the car while they drive. They don't get to watch the video, but they can listen to it. I feel the average resident does not have the opportunity to actually listen to a live stream at work. I feel once they are at work, there's no longer that ability. I think they might be able to read something quickly, but not listen to. So I think good questions to kind of challenge us, make sure we're thinking with the right thought process. But again, I think 8 a.m. is going to allow more engagement than 9 a.m. would.
Councilmember Wilson, did you have your...
Yes, I did. Just a practical consideration. I think one of the reasons why this was put on the agenda is because of the difficulties of when we have a Tuesday night mayor and council meeting and a ComDev meeting that follows
Monday.
the next morning. Well, it's a Tuesday
Or
night
move it to a
meeting.
Tuesday.
I think we had this happen with Memorial Day. So the next Wednesday was a ComDev meeting. So that means that folks who were here had a very short time to be away from here. So I think it was just a very practical reason. So I guess if not as supporting moving it to 9 o'clock permanently, because I do think that citizens have access, to the live stream and also to the recorded versions as well. And if perhaps we could consider when we are moving meetings to Tuesday, we might also look and see what ComDev meetings are
Good
affected.
point. Okay, all right. This is on the agenda as an agenda item vote, so we will take a motion. when
Motion
that
to
time.
deny.
So I have a motion to deny, changing from 8 to 9 from Councilmember Claremont. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, but I would also like to reiterate the concerns that Councilmember Wilsey has,
Okay.
and that can we deny and then add a motion to, when we move the council meeting, that not have them back to back? Could we do that at the same time?
We can do that if Councilmember Claremont is open.
I'm not necessarily
Friendly
opposed,
amendment.
it just sounds
A
complicated.
friendly amendment to your motion to deny. I don't know how you do that, but
Yeah. So
withdraw your motion.
I motion to deny, and I would like to add that this council should give consideration when the council meeting's not a Monday night and there's the back-to-back. Does that address the thought process?
So we have that motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I seconded it.
We have a second by Mayor Henry.
Right.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. So, and we'll look at those as they come up and try to look ahead on the schedule and let you all know in advance when something might be coming up for that discussion. Item number 4 on the administration agenda is a discussion regarding the FY 2019 budget item. We have an item that's been, it was deferred at the last meeting. We have $50,000 in our FY 19 budget right now for an economic development review. Our administrator had sent out a memo in regards to these funds right now. In looking at an economic review for $50,000, basically what we got back would be a very, very high-level review. As a matter of fact, Carl Vinson Institute even came back at like $55,000. So there was some discussion on, do we want to try to do that now? Do we want to, we're about to do a strategic plan. I think anything that we do could be affected heavily by the strategic plan in our direction. There was also some thought process of either defunding this project altogether or seeing if there's another place that can be used. We heard at our last committee meeting an update from the East Roswell Action Committee in regards to some of the things that they're looking at doing, maybe updating some of their plans, maybe doing some localized surveys or things like that, so that money could be used there. So this is a discussion to see what you all want to do with the $50,000 that's currently in the FY19 budget. Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent, thank you. So this was definitely a highly discussed item when approving the 2018 budget, so I definitely have some thoughts on it. But first off, you said the city administrator sent out a memo?
As a part of this, that
Included in the binder, okay, so
correct.
not separate.
No, not a separate one.
Excellent, thank you. So bottom line is, I think that analysis that we all unanimously supported in that budget, I think it was really important because it does two things. One, what it did was, so when I look to Roswell economic development, a big issue that I have that I blame I put 100% of the blame on the elected officials, is there's no clear vision, guidance, goals. So that's nobody's fault except for these 7 elected officials, which I'm certainly one of them. So that's one very important thing. It's necessary for Roswell Inc. to be able to really have its its direction and which way it's marching. And so one of the goals and one of the necessities from this economic development analysis was going to give us the opportunity to get together and define those goals, clear goals, where any resident that is then just questioning we're giving so much money towards the economic development, that's a broad term, what specifically is it working towards? I would want any single resident to be able to see, remember, the mayor and council, they set forth these 3 goals, 2 goals, 5 goals, whatever it is. And as you can see from Roswell Inc.'s presentation, that's exactly what they're marching towards. So that's one big part of what was really important to come out of this analysis. Number 2, for what was really important to come out of this analysis, was the fact that we have a very different model than a lot of our neighbors. We have a very different model than Alpharetta, than Atlanta, than many, many other locations. Maybe we have the best model, maybe we don't, even if we have the best, there's always opportunities for improvement, and we need to understand strengths and weaknesses as any model would have. By bringing in a group that focuses on this, helps us support Roswell Inc. in helping support them and their model and the ways that the city of Roswell is supporting them. So I feel personally that it's irresponsible to be giving the large amount of money each year without having defined these two areas. With that, so for that reason, I feel this needs to continue to be a priority, and we need to move forward with it sooner. And then at the same time, if this council decides there's a preference to delay this, my whole big thing is, as discussed with the budget, is the fact that it was agreed upon and it was unanimous that additional money, which you have as a different agenda item, was tied to that. That was basically going to be released after this. So those two go together. My preference is we do the analysis, which is the right thing to do to support Roswell Inc., the right thing to do to really show transparency of our elected officials around economic development to the community, to the residents, to the taxpayers, and that's what I want to do, and I want those two to continue to be tied. So either we delay both of those things, or we delay neither of those things.
Okay. Mayor Henry.
The concern I have is that Mr. Palmer came back to us and said we can't do diddly squat for $50,000. So I really don't want to throw $50,000 down the drain.
I agree.
So that's why I propose that we use that money for the East Roswell Economic Action Committee, because they have an extensive, aggressive work plan. They're really on track for doing some things. I'm very, very pleased at what they have done in 3 short meetings. So And I've not been attending them, but I have just heard through the grapevine that they're just awesome. So I would really like to see, since we can't do diddly squat with 50K in what we originally set out, I think that money would be well spent for resources for the Economic Action Committee.
Councilmember Tyson?
Thank you. So, Michael, I helped create this one with you.
Absolutely.
And at the time, I hadn't seen the presentation from, I think it was the SEDP guy, who clearly laid out the different methods that cities do this in. And I think if I remember right, there were 3 different versions.
Yep.
Having seen that, I think if we got ourselves together and I don't know if it's a workshop or something, and talked our way through it, I think we could figure out what the answer is amongst the group of us. We do it in public, we can do, all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure, and I think the city administrators kind of confirmed it, that we need to go to an outside group and pay them $50,000 when there's really, whatever it is, 3 models of how it should work. Because that's what we were trying to figure out, is what those models looked like. At the time, I didn't understand, that those were the 3. And our city administrator, I think, has some ideas on how to do that. So I'm almost where Mayor Henry is on this. I might propose that we don't spend the entire $50,000 with the East Roswell Action Committee. If they could get by with maybe half of that, I'm sure we can find some good things to do. Hanging on to the other half. That would be something I'd be interested in.
Parcel it out as well.
Yeah.
As they come through with projects.
With projects that we like, so it's sort of an up to, we hold it in the bank for what those projects might be. I could be supportive of something like that.
Councilmember Zapata, did you have your?
Yes, thanks. So, I see here that, maybe the scope that we gave Mr. Palmer that came with the economic development review was too broad, maybe not too focused. And my opinion is that we need to focus on the analysis and recommendation for best economic structure for the city of Roswell, taking into consideration all different organizations at the local, state, regional, and national level working on economic development. There's so many different organizations at different levels focusing on economic development, and we need to make sure that we have the best structure that will coordinate all of them, will carry the vision of this mayor and council forward. So it's 2 different things. Until we don't have the structure, it's very hard for anybody to carry forward the vision of the mayor and council. And also, all these outside organizations at the local, state, regional, national level, they're not really accountable to this mayor and council, and even less to the, taxpayers of Roswell. So we need to focus on, these 3 models mentioned. Well, if we all have a clear understanding what is the best model for Roswell, for this complex environment in Georgia and in North Fulton, then we can decide ourselves. But seems like for the last few years we keep, talking about, but not really addressing the real issues, like, is this the right structure for economic development in the city of Roswell? If we need help from a consultant, from the outside consultant, I'm supporting to keep this 50 or part of this 50 just to focus on the analysis and recommendation for the right structure for economic development in Roswell. That is my priority. That is what I think is step number 1, because if you don't have this foundation in place, everything else is hard to move forward. So if we can reduce the scope of the economic development review as just for the structure analysis of the economic development in the city of Roswell, I will support keeping all or part of the $50,000.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo?
Excellent, thank you. So I think a lot of good comments. So I think I'm hearing the points that maybe there's some aspects we can kind of knock out ourselves. So Mr. Tizer, you brought up the side of it of the looking at what is the right model. separately, what wasn't addressed, but I think when you and I discussed, you kind of were in agreement as well, us coming up with what is really the goal, what are they really focused on? And that's something actually even more so, I think it's probably pretty likely we could handle ourselves. But, you know, when we passed this budget, what we all agreed upon and publicly committed to was the fact that this money would be held by the city pending the outcome of the economic development review study. And so I don't want to just throw money towards if it's not going to be the right study or enough. But I think what I think makes sense is we defer this item and we defer the request for getting that money out, that 40,000. We defer that and we do it to the point where I'd say ASAP in an upcoming committee meeting or work session, we do two things. One aspect we cover is we actually walk through what should be the key goals that we want Roswell Inc. really marching for in the next year. So that's one thing we really work through and see if we're able to kind of come up with some clear direction. And then number two, we talk about, to Mr. Zapata's point, narrowing the scope. So there was a very broad scope, which of course is going to have the higher fee. Instead, we get a laser focus on here's the exact scope, and we discuss that, and we see if that's something that can be quickly done at the right budget. I think that could be a possible compromise here.
Mayor Henry.
I have a real concern that we have a pattern going here. And this item was deferred, and I'm not sure, raise your hands if you did a lot of homework on it between the last committee meeting and this committee meeting. We don't seem to be accomplishing anything, and my contention is these committees as a whole are to get this work done, and that we all have homework to do between these meetings. So when we defer something, it is my expectation that we are all going to work on that to come to a consensus at the next meeting, but I'm not seeing that happen. So I have that concern. The other concern I've got revolves around the strategic plan, and this is I'll tell you right now, my prediction is that economic development is going to be number one in our strategic plan. It's definitely going to be in the top three. So, what does that look like? And I'm just a little frustrated.
Councilmember Tyson.
So I just want to correct and enhance one thing, Councilmember Palermo. The way that $40,000 was structured was if we did not hire a economic development director, we would give them the 40,000. If we did, then and it was on their side of the ledger, we would fund it up to 100. If it was on our side, we would fund it on our side and not give the 40. In addition to that, in this most current budget that we just approved, they brought their number down to the 560, assuming that not only essentially that economic development director is a separate issue. So I think those are two separate things, but I'd like to make a recommendation on this, and what I'd like to recommend, if you're so inclined to accept it, is that we do set up a public work session to talk our way through what we think the structure should look like, what we think the objectives should look like, and move that part forward, and then take this $50,000 and I think your word was parcel it out as we think needed for those economic development projects that are happening right now and today, versus spending it on this, because I think things have changed and they're a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Councilmember Palermo.
So I think there is some stuff in there that makes sense. And it also was related to the mayor's comment to make sure that if we're going to defer something, there's clear action items, what are the steps in between just the next deferral date. What I'd like to see is we set up that work session, we go through these items, and for that reason, because that work session has not occurred yet, we haven't reached a consensus or even just really completed that discussion, we defer both this item and the releasing the 40,000 to the first committee after that work session.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, thanks, Michael. So, yeah, I mean, between between ourselves can decide the right structure, leaving politics outside this door and just focusing on technical aspect, then I would say yes. If we're not able to do that, then we need a technical aspect into this room to guide us and reason with us from the technical, professional aspect, not the political aspect. So all depends. We have to be honest with ourselves to say, are we going to be able to analyze this, technically and come to the best structure for the city of Roswell from the technical point of view? Or we still throwing it so much politics into economic development that will get us blind into take the best decision to make or decide on the best structure. So I think that, in many cases, a professional consultant with technical knowledge will help this body to navigate this and be very objective on the decision that we take in terms of the best structure of economic development for the city of Roswell, and not anything political, friendship, relationship, or whatever it is, and just focus on pure technical decision. If we can do that, and we are honest with ourselves and we say yes, we can do that, and leave outside everything and just focus on the best for Roswell, for the future, the present and the future, then we don't need the consultant. Otherwise, I think the consultant is very helpful to guide us through the process to come to the conclusion of what is the best structure. So I really don't know still if we can do this between ourselves.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes, I just wanted to suggest the SCDP 2.0 that was presented has a number of recommended actions. I know some of them are probably things that Roswell Inc. is working on, and probably some of them are also things that they could use a little bit more direction and being set as priorities for us. So I would suggest, if it's possible, maybe we could do that work session with Roswell Inc. and talk about some of these things among ourselves as well as the structure. I think we've got a lot of these tools here. We just haven't we may not have given the right guidance that we need to.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point, but, Roswell Inc. is just only one player of many players on economic development in the state of Georgia, on the Southeast, and in the United States. So if we're going to keep just focusing on one element and missing so many other elements, and how are we going to coordinate the efforts between those different players, so then we don't get the whole picture. I'm looking for the big picture here, and the big picture goes way above and beyond Roswell Inc. There's so many players out there. You have the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Economic Development Department. And you can go and go and go to the federal level. So Roswell Inc. is just one component of this, and we're missing the big picture. This is my main concern, that we keep just focusing in one element, missing the big picture, and missing the coordination of efforts and vision with all the different players related to economic development. That is my concern.
Councilmember Tyser, go ahead.
This is going to be really painful for me, but I'm going to agree with Councilmember Zapata. I really was very painful. I'm really not having a discussion in my mind about Roswell Inc. at all. I'm having a discussion in my mind about economic development director, which to me is a significantly different function. One is a subset of the other. So an economic development director may do things like, if the community is looking at, I'm going to make this up, a performing arts center, right? That is an element of economic development that's outside of Roswell Inc.'s charter. They would have nothing to do with that. Roswell Inc. has a different function. It's an important function. It's a subset of what economic development is. If citizens of Roswell want to do a River Park master plan, right? And there's economic development aspects to that, including, how do you fund it? That's things that an economic development director might do. Now, where that particular person sits whether they're outside or inside. Those are the discussions I'm talking about having. I'm not talking about the Roswell Inc. situation at all. And that's different for me than it was a year ago. As I've learned more about municipal government, as I've learned more about what works and what doesn't work, as I've learned more about specifically what's needed in Roswell itself. And so that's really what I want to explore. And I think, in my mind, I think I know what the answer might be, and it would probably surprise you to hear. But that's the discussion I want to have. I don't want to talk about the specifics of a Roswell Inc. until we've worked our way down through what does economic development do, and it's much more than just the function that Roswell Inc. performs. So separate things to me.
Councilmember Wilson, you had a comment?
No, I would just, I agree with that. I just think it's probably a bigger discussion that we need to have.
Okay. Councilmember
Three of
Palermo.
us agreeing with you, Marcel.
Councilmember Palermo.
So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to defer these two related items till after we have a work session. And we have the mayor's office, if the mayor's office is interested in working on setting up a work session as soon as possible, and then having these two items covered in whatever that following committee is.
Councilmember Tyson.
So I can't sign on to not meeting an obligation that we made and a deal that we made with with our partner organization. And so, again, I see them as two separate things. I'm not sure that I'd call it a deferral either. I think I'd call it this is the action plan that council would like to see.
But,
Councilmember Zapata.
well, we're talking about item number 4 and number 6, sort of like, this is what we do here, like,
We're on item number 4.
okay, but the money we're talking about, the commitment, is item number 6? Okay, so,
No, we're on item number 4.
okay,
I know it's come up in the discussion. You're absolutely correct.
Right. Okay.
I think they're mutually exclusive at this point, although Councilmember Palermo believes that they interact. So just looking for a motion on what we need to do with the 50,000 for the economic development review.
And I'm not at all saying I'll be opposed to releasing this $40,000. It's just I feel more comfortable with it once we have this work session as soon as possible.
Councilmember Wilson.
I would make a motion to hold the $50,000 to be allocated for use for other economic development research and studies.
Okay, so we have a motion to hold the 50,000 and use it, parcel out, so to speak, if there's other items or action items that come up that need funding. So that's a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that as long as we are choosing a diverse group. When you say economic needs, does that include the action committee?
Yes.
Well, so
Yes, it does.
because there's the lack of clarity, and I actually feel at the moment we should be denying this, knowing that I think we'll all agree that potentially there's other things that we could spend it on, perhaps some of it for an actual analysis, some of it on East Roswell, but I'd prefer to not release it until we have those specific items that we want to release it for.
Okay, so we have go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to clarify, I don't think any of it would be released until something was proposed and voted on.
Right,
specifically.
so
It would
that's-
just be set aside.
But that's why my preference is we deny this. We still have 50,000 set up for economic development review. And then when we actually have things to use it on, whether it's an actual economic development analysis, it's the East Roswell committee, et cetera, then that's when I feel we should be releasing it.
So we have a
I'm gonna
motion and
second
second
this.
for right now.
I'm going to second Ms. Wilsey's.
Well, I have a second from the mayor.
Well, you did second it?
She did. With the understanding of it would go to whatever committee or whatever action would come up that would be for economic development that you would choose to fund.
Thank you.
So I do have that motion as a second. Is there any other discussion on that motion?
so still to understand that these 50,000 have to still come back to mayor and council to
Before we
vote
spend it,
for a
correct.
specific
Even if we want to spend 5,000 of it, it's got to come
Correct.
back to council.
We're just trying to figure out coming up to the end of the budget year, because it goes away unless we motion and move to do something with it.
So it's just a motion pretty much to park the 50,000 for any economic development study or that mayor and council will approve in the
Correct.
future.
That's my understanding of the motion in the second.
Okay.
All in favor of that motion, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. So item number 5, moving to the Finance Department, is consideration of the FY 2019 year-end budget amendment. I think Ryan, Mr. Luckett is going to cover this topic.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Fine.
This is our FY 2019 end-of-year budget amendment. This is something, as you know, we do on an annual basis. More as just to clean up a few items as we prepare to close the end of the fiscal year. Everyone has this document in your packet, and it provides a little more detail on each of the items that we'll discuss tonight. But as we go through this presentation, I'll explain what some of the items are. So starting with our general fund operating budgets and the revenues, we are recommending to recognize an additional $1.2 million in sales tax revenue that came in above our budget for FY 2019. The second item is recognizing revenue from the sale of surplus property. So we do budget a certain amount for that each year, but we did have revenues come in about $100,000 more than what we anticipated, so we are recognizing that revenue as well. The third item that's listed there is the additional revenue from the insurance reimbursement for Rapstick. So a while back, we did receive an initial payment from the insurance company for that reconstruction. And then what we're doing here is recognizing the remaining part of that as reconstruction of Rapstick gets underway. So that's about $1.8 million for total increase in our revenue budget of $3.1 million. On the expenditure side of our general fund, we are recommending some increases in our expenditure budget. And this is slightly different than what you see in our packet because we have made a change to this first item, the legal fees. We are recommending to increase our legal fee budget by $150,000 for FY 2019. The current budget there is revised budget is $124,000, so we would increase that by $150,000 to account for the various legal expenses that we have coming in FY 2019. We're also recommending an increase in professional services of $8,000, and you can see in the parentheses there, this is related to the surplus property that we auction off every year. So the more property that we auction off, the higher our expenses are, so we do need to increase that budget to account for the increased expenses that we've incurred. Also on the expenditure side, you see the insurance claim money for Rapstick as well. So we received the revenue, and now we want to budget that revenue for the construction contract that's underway. That's $1.8 million. And then this last item is related to the Emergency Operations Center. So there's, I believe, city administrator is working with Michael and Chief Burnett to have a more permanent location for our current EOC here in City Hall, with Rapstick being down. And so the decision was made to locate that in G45 on the bottom level. There is some work that needs to be done to get that fully functional. The total cost of that work is $100,000. It includes things like dedicated air conditioning for that particular room, generator work, audio-visual equipment. That's the bulk of the expense. Chief Burnett has found funding savings within his current budget to cover $85,000 of that work. And so the request is to fund an additional $15,000 to get to the full $100,000 for that, to make the EOC permanently here at City Hall. So that would be a total increase in the expenditure budget in the general fund of $1.9 million.
So right before you go off that page, I think Councilmember Tyson has a question regarding.
So, what happens to the roughly $1 million difference between unanticipated revenue and unanticipated expenses?
So once we close the fiscal year, those funds will become part of fund balance and will be available for programming by the council as we get to mid-year, or as we get to next year's budget, or if something were to come up during the fiscal year as well.
So just to make sure that I understand that correctly, it's about roughly $1,125,000 or so that is not included in the budget we just passed, but available to be used?
Right, this is the FY19 budget.
Understand?
Yeah.
So it's excess 19 budget money that now can be used for future items?
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you.
So to summarize, we are recognizing additional revenue of $3.1 million, recommending an increase in the expenditure budget of 1.9, which would leave about $1.1 million in fund balance over the reserve by policy in the general fund. Moving on to the capital projects fund. This is really just the accounting for the emergency operations center item that we just talked about. So any capital items are funded or are paid for through our capital projects fund. So we're transferring those funds over to this particular fund. That's the first item. The second item is the donation from the Ramblers for the new bus. And so council approved $90,000 back at mid-year. They're donating $7,754. So we're recognizing that revenue as well as increasing the expenditure budget for that purchase. The third item there, the IT equipment replacement. This is the exact same thing that council approved a few months back with the replacement citywide of the servers and switches. This is simply recognizing the revenue from the lease program that was approved, as well as setting up the expenditure budget for that purchase as well. The last item under the revenue section is related to our enterprise lease program. So this is recognizing revenue that we received from them, from Enterprise, as they purchased from us our FY 2018 vehicle purchases. So those vehicles we initially purchased, they bought them from us, and then we're going to be leasing them from Enterprise moving forward. But they did purchase that, and we received revenue of $1.1 million. So we're recommending total revenue increase in our capital projects fund of $2.2 million. On the expenditure side, the total increase is $1.1 million, and those are all items we've discussed as well. So capital projects fund summary, a current fund balance of $450,000, an increase in revenues of $2.2 million, gives us $2.7 million available. We are recommending an increase in expenditures by 1.1, which would leave us with $1.5 million available in our capital projects fund balance. Our workers' compensation fund, we are recommending an increase in our expenditure budget there of $75,000 due to claims, workers' comp claims. Not necessarily the number of claims this year, but more of several larger claims that have come in and have exceeded the budget that we projected for FY 2019. So we are recommending an increase of $75,000. In our group benefits fund, we are recommending to recognize revenues of $372,000 and increase our expenditure budget by $372,000. These are revenues that we receive from our stop-loss insurance carrier when we have individual claims that exceed our threshold. We get reimbursed for those. So there's still expenses to us, but we get reimbursed on the backside. So we're increasing our revenues as well as increasing our expenditure budget. Oh, and I did want to point out here, you do see that the fund balance over our reserve by policy is negative. So what that means is that we have dipped below our reserve policy. The fund itself is not negative, but because of the spending that has occurred this year, we have dipped below that. We do anticipate that as we finish out this year, that we should be back above our reserve policy, but I did want to explain the reason for that. And then our special events fund, This is an increase in expenditures of $3,000. This is related to Alive in Roswell. As you might remember, when we set up this fund, we did propose an estimated budget of what we thought they would need for FY 2019. They do need a little bit more money to finish out the fiscal year. There's no concern with the availability of that. It is included in our revenues and the fund balance for that fund. We have collected all the sponsorships and vendor payments and things like that. So the money is there. They just need to increase their expenditure budget by $3,000 to finish out FY 2019. And then finally, this last item takes a little bit of explanation, but currently within the city, we have a tree bank fund, and those are the funds that ComDev controls and comes to you all to allocate funding for each on an annual basis. In addition to that, in the past, there have been a couple of different programs or pots of money for trees. There was the tree planting partnership. There's about $55,000 available in that program. And then there was just a general tree planting program that existed. Both of those programs, the tree planting partnership and the tree planting program, combined have about $110,000. We'd like to transfer those funds to the tree bank fund so it's all in one place and we're not tracking these funds in a variety of different places. And so we're recommending to move that money to the tree bank fund, and there the city could allocate all of these funds from one place to whatever tree projects that the council would approve.
Councilmember, Mayor Henry?
I would like to point out, though, we discussed this earlier, that there was $55,000 that was earmarked for the transportation department the way we had set it up originally. I don't think, and Mr. Del Roche, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that the department is aware of that $55,000 that is for their use. I know we've had a number of projects where we needed transportation, needed those trees. So I would like to still keep it earmarked that that $55,000 is still within the transportation department for their use on road projects and right-of-way projects.
Mayor Henry, first off, we were not aware of the transportation's ability to use these funds. Second, whatever the committee decides to work with, whatever the committee decides is fine with us. Primarily because next month the committee, we're going to be bringing an item with you to spend some of those funds anyway. So whether you decide to move it now or keep it in the original spot and we spend it next month, it doesn't change much for us.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that it's earmarked for you because there were, we gave it to transportation, an allotment, and to Rec and Parks. Now, Rec and Parks burned through theirs.
Hey.
You guys are lollygagging, so, and you got to watch out for Rec and Parks because they'll have their fingers in your cookie jar.
You'll take cookies.
We fairly regularly over the years have been submitting requests during Lenore's annual based on fiscal year requests. So I think in this case, it was simply an oversight and not being aware that transportation had these funds available.
Councilmember Tyson?
Ryan?
Yes.
So the fund balance is at the end, right now is at 404. You move 110.9 in. I don't understand the expenditure piece.
We're proposing to go ahead and budget those funds so that they're available to be spent. So the fund balance will stay the same because we're actually appropriating those dollars to be spent. So
Appropriating them to where? I think that's kind of the heart of the question here.
they would be budgeted, but any use of it would still require mayor and council approval. So it's a matter of just, it's sitting in an expense account, ready to be spent once mayor and council approve it, as opposed to sitting in fund balance.
So it's not new revenue. So the revenue increase for the tree bank fund, but it's also expense because it's taken out of other departments, the 110.
You could do it either way, is what you're saying. You just
Correct.
prefer to
Have it all in one.
It could sit
earmark
in
it.
fund balance, and we could do a budget amendment to allocate it later if we
Right.
wanted to. But
So if I was asking the question, how much do we have in the tree bank fund? The answer would be 515,000 and some odd
Right.
dollars.
plus whatever ComDev has already budgeted in the council's already approved in the late, when they came back to pay us this time last year.
I understand.
So,
Combining the funds to me makes complete sense, but, you know, I give deference to, I don't want Rob to lose his $55,000.
Councilmember Zapata.
Just because he's slow.
so maybe, you know, by understanding the purpose of each of the tree planting program, the tree planting partnership, and the tree bank fund, you understanding better the purpose of each of them, we can determine if it makes sense to leave money on every single of these funds, because, you know, I don't know, maybe you can explain better so then we understand if it makes sense to just leave it whatever it is on each of them, because maybe different department has access to different different tree programs.
So the tree planting partnership program is in administration. And that's the program where our grants department actually provides grants to community groups that want to go with a 50-50 grant. If they want to plant trees in a public area, they can come to us and say, we want to do this, we have half of the money, we want half of the money. Every year we do, we publicize that, we promote it, and every year it's crickets. We don't get anybody to do anything with it. So that money just sits there year after year and rolls over. It's in there for trees, but that tree planting partnership program is not, it started out pretty good, but they want to do in-kind stuff nowadays, these other groups do. They want to do the volunteer work, but they've got to have 50% of the money. So if we move that portion of the money, it was about $55,000. If that portion goes into the tree bank fund, we're very happy with that, because we're trying to push those grant dollars out, and we can't get them out there. If it goes into the tree bank fund, it's there for trees. And that's the whole purpose, is to get trees planted. So from that particular program, I can speak on that, and we're happy to see that go somewhere where it can be better utilized than the tree planting partnership program. So that's a good one to go. The other one, I think,
Planting
partnership program.
All right. Then the other one?
So the tree planting program, I think, was money allocated years ago. And that's part of the reason it caught our attention, is that it hasn't been spent in so long. We just keep carrying it forward, and we thought, you know, we know someone is managing the tree bank fund. It would be easily visible and allocated that way. So the thought was to have it all in one place. We know someone is actively managing those funds, and they're still being used for the same purpose. And the departments still have access to those funds by going through community development as well.
Councilmember Tyser.
Yeah, Ryan, I would agree and be supportive of having it in one visible, transparent place, you know, to the extent that it's not sitting in a general fund with a million other line items.
Mm-hmm.
It's now right there. And when we ask a question about tree funds, right, you're going to pull out this sheet and all the activity in that fund, and you can show it to us, and we don't have to find the little pockets where it might have come from. So I think that's a much more transparent way to show it.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the tree planting partnership is remaining. It's not going away. It's just that the funds will be considered.
It would be defunded at this point, but if we have a group that comes in and wants to do something, we can bring it back and talk about it, or we can do it out of the tree bank fund. The program is still there. It's just nobody, but we've got 55,000 sitting there not doing anything.
Right.
So yeah, we could still, if a group wants to come to do that. I think we plant, the last one I remember is over at the Adult Rec Center over at the pool. When we finished that, there's some trees along that road right on the front. I think a Cub Scout troop or Boy Scout troop or something was interested in that, and they did like a 50-50, but the program could continue, but we can fund it out of here. Mayor Henry.
Mr. Halsey's checking on it. I don't remember if we adopted that by ordinance or by policy. So by moving the money, it would not remove that unless we made a conscious decision to do that.
Okay, good. As long as the partnership funds are available, I think there are some good uses to partner with organizations or HOAs.
Yeah, I think as long as it's an active program, we can just fund it from here if we get any takers on it. Councilmember Zapata.
So what will guarantee that in the future, the tree planting partnership will have money. I mean, what about if some project come and clean up the tree bank fund, and there's no more money on the tree bank fund, and some project come and say, hey, we can apply for the tree planting partnership. I said, I'm sorry, but someone came before you and cleaned it up.
So I think with any grant program, there's only a certain amount of dollars that are allocated each year. If they come, we can come to you all and say, hey, we've got a program. Do you want to fund it? Do you want to do an amendment for that? And you can, or if not, if you don't want to, there's just not any money in it until it's funded back up. And there are grants that do that. There's a certain amount of dollars. Once those dollars are gone, until it's reallocated in the new fiscal year. So that could happen. There's a lot more money here to be able to look at than $55,000, and we've been carrying that money for a few years now. Most of the projects that we do are quite small because the participating groups have to provide 50% of it's a 50-50 matching grant, so it might be a couple $1,000s at a time, so it's usually not very much money that they do that.
We also maintain an operating contingency fund in the general funds. I mean, that money, that could be used, especially if it's, we're talking a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
If it came up during the year, the council could decide to use those funds as well for that.
And what is the problem to leave it on the tree planting partnership?
The problem is not the program itself. The problem is where it's at, where it sits in the general fund, and it's not being utilized. And so the thought is that by putting it in the tree bank fund, there's a lot of, you have someone that's actively managing those funds, and you have, the priorities of the council that can be considered and funded on an annual basis.
It's $50,000 worth of budget that's just sitting there year after year that could be utilized in other areas that we think would be more appropriate than just sitting there.
Okay. And I believe that I might have skipped one item, so I'm going to go back really quick. And it's not listed on here, that's why I skipped it. If you look on the document that's in your packet and you take a look at number 8, number 8 on the document in your packet is the Old Mill Park Trail Wall. These are not new funds. These funds are already budgeted in our capital projects fund. They're hotel motel trail funds. And what we're recommending is to transfer these funds and basically create a new capital project for the Recreation and Parks Department. They have a trail wall at Old Mill Park that needs to be replaced. And they actually submitted this through the FY20 budget process. And just in our work to try and balance the budget, we had these funds available. We recommended to them to take that out of the budget process itself and to fund it this way. So again, these funds are already designated for this purpose. They're in the capital projects fund. This is just approval to really set up the new capital project and repair the wall. So those are all the items for the end of year budget amendments. And you can see a summary there of all the different funds, the impact to those funds. And if you have any questions, I'd answer them.
Any other questions for Mr. Luckett? We have a motion to accept the FY 2019 end of year budget amendment.
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilmember Tyson, a second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ryan.
Item number 6 is consideration of a request from Roswell, Inc. to release FY 2019 budgeted funds in the amount of $40,000.
So just to give you a little bit of background here, this was part of our FY 2019 budget process. The budget request that was submitted by Roswell Inc. at that time was for $600,000. The budget actually got proposed with them being funded at $600,000. And then the budget was approved for FY 2019 at the level of $660,000. As we've already discussed here, during that delete process, the council approved increasing that to $660,000. The $100,000 was reserved pending the outcome of the economic development review. To date, we've paid Roswell Inc. $560,000, and then they've submitted a request to release $40,000 for them to fully fund their initial budget request for FY 2019.
Councilmember Palermo.
So I don't believe I'd be opposed to releasing the 40,000, but I am opposed tonight. I do feel we should have some discussion around the work session, some more review of the economic development details as kind of laid out. Again, I absolutely see myself supporting this, but not tonight. I'd much prefer deferral tonight.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. So, $100,000 will be held by the city pending the outcome of an economic development review study. What was the outcome of an economic development review study? Can anybody explain to me what was the outcome of an economic development review study
Well,
mentioned here?
those were the funds that we just talked about recently, and they were not, the study wasn't.
Okay, so there's no outcome so far. So if it's tied to the outcome and it's not outcome, on a pure logical reasoning, then shouldn't be released until the outcome of an economic development review study. That is a pure logic reasoning, but if there's another reasoning, I would like to hear.
Councilmember Tyser.
So that's not exactly the way it came down. The way it was supposed to is how I stated earlier, that if we did it one way, we would give them 100. If we did it another way, or didn't do it at all, they would get the 40. Okay, that was what we said we'd do for them, and so I think we ought to meet the obligation that we let out there and release it as planned.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yeah, I was just to follow up on that. I mean, we changed our direction of the $100,000. As a part of that, we also need to change the direction of Russelling's request for operating funds. It's really a cause and effect.
But we didn't change
We created
anything so
ones.
far.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Councilmember Palermo.
So what I'd like to see is that to be included in the packet. So I obviously reviewed the agenda packet. I did not have time to go back to those meetings yet. I did have Livia send me the links. So I do plan on catching up for them. But again, if that's the case, it's there. I think that's something we should be showing the public, and then I'll support it. But I'd like to defer it until we do just show that additional background.
Councilmember Tyser.
I'm going to suggest that we move it forward tonight. It'll go before council. That'll give us plenty of time to review that and make that determination.
Councilmember Zapata.
So I'm confused. What is the official version? Because I'm reading here on the item number 6 under description, and so with the stipulation of that 100,000 will be held by the city pending the outcome of an economic development review study. I'm reading this as description on item number 6, and then Councilmember Tyser is telling me there was different agreement, so I don't know what is the official agreement here, so we can base on what was official, what is official to base our decision. I'm confused here. So, and then, we don't have an economic development review study yet. Doesn't mean that we won't have it. So we haven't changed this. It's just we didn't do it, but doesn't mean that we won't do it. So I don't know. I'm confused. So if I base my decision of what I read here on the description of item number 6 of today committee meeting, doesn't make sense to release the $40,000. No, you didn't. No, you. So I don't know. I see if I want to hear more comments and.
Councilmember Wilson.
I'd like to second Councilmember Tyser's motion to bring it forward.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Tyser to move it forward to the council meeting. I have a second by Councilmember Wilson. Any other discussion?
So do you make a motion to it?
Mayor Henry.
I would like to make sure that there are detailed minutes of that budget meeting motion that is introduced in our packet, because
Okay.
it is somewhat confusing, and I'm hearing different things from different people. So I just would like that clarification.
We'll make sure that's included in the packet if this moves forward. All in favor of moving this forward to the next council meeting, raise your hand. That's Mayor Henry, Councilmember Wilson, and Councilmember Tyser, all opposed. Councilmember Palermo and Councilmember Zapata. Thank
I
you.
might
So we'll
change
get
my
that.
vote at the council meeting, but until I have that review.
Sure, we'll get you that information in the packet, if not sooner than that. All right, thank you, Mr. Luckett. We'll move over to Recreation and Parks. Item number 7 is consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a construction contract with Ride Grading in the amount of $215,957.51 for a driveway connection between Grimes Bridge Park and the Groveway Community Park. Mr. Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mayor, council members, Livia. This project is part of the 2016 strategic master plan for, at that time, the park was called Waller Park Extension, and now it is renamed to Groveway Park. So it is part of the strategic plan to increase connectivity between the parks for not only patrons of the adult recreation center and the pool, but also from the neighborhood. The closest, most vocal neighborhood at the time was the Meadowwood group, because they would have to drive down all the way Grimes Bridge to Oxbow, all the way to Dobbs to get to Groveway Park. So at this time, this project is a joint project with transportation. Even though y'all picked on transportation and us using their tree fund, I would like to say thank you very much for Elizabeth Shaw, who's here tonight, unless she snuck out, and Rob Del Ross and Mohammed Rolf for their help with this project. They engineered and saved not only our department, but the city a tremendous amount of money. We worked with Ryan Luckett's purchasing staff to come up with the bid documents that was posted. We had a pre-bid meeting of 7 attendees. We had 5 responses by the deadline. All the references were evaluated, and purchasing, transportation, and recreation parks has recommended to go with Ride Grading in the sum of $215,957.51. And I was picking on Ryan with the agenda because if you don't turn the agenda item over, you don't see the remaining dollars that were needed, because I panicked when Mr. Leatherman had asked me, because the financial impact only said the $200,000, and I was unaware till Mr. Luckett told me that the remaining funding source was on the page 2, which was from our capital contingency savings that we had with the Riverwalk projects and other projects in our department. So I would like to ask that this body move this forward for approval at the next available mayor and council meeting.
Councilmember
Glad to answer your
Zapata.
questions.
Right, so, so this will be to connect the 2 parking lot, the one down, the one up, so cars can move around, and that is great.
Yes, sir.
That is much needed, and I appreciate this initiative, and I think it will be a huge improvement to the flow of cars, and people get confused. Is my game on the lower field, on the upper field? So then you have to park, you have to go up the stairs, and then leave the car there, and I mean, that will be like great for people who get confused of which field the kids are playing. happened to me, and
that
so I know what it is.
Sounds personal, doesn't it?
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I
Make a
mean,
motion, go ahead.
motion to
So we
approve.
have a motion by Councilmember Zapata to approve this ASAP,
Oh my God,
and second by
I
Councilmember
love it.
Tyson. All in favor, raise your hand.
Go get it, Jeff.
That's unanimous.
Don't take any of their trees.
And Mayor Henry, we will work with transportation to use some of their tree funds on this project if you would like, because there are 2 trees
Your
that are.
fingers out of that jar.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. When can get done then?
That's why he's
That's not
leaving right
part-
now.
That's not part of the deal, he's done now.
That would be great.
Get out of here before you have to commit. No pressure, Luke.
So we'll move into the Public Safety, Public Works Committee meeting. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting of May 14th, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Tyson. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor of approving those minutes, raise your hand. That's unanimous.
So,
I'm gonna-
Mr. Fisher, I'd like to ask this committee if they'd have any concerns, if we had actually moved to item 6 and cover that first. Would there be any concerns? And then I'd end up heading out a little earlier, but this is one I want to make sure to be.
The dog's not waiting in the car or anything, is it?
We'll move to item number 6 of the Public Safety agenda, which is discussion regarding safe hotel ordinance. And I'll open that up for discussion. I think Councilmember Palermo, if you want to start that.
Excellent, yeah, absolutely. So this is an important one to me. And actually, a little history, just so you're all aware. There actually, years ago, before any of us were on council, there were discussions of something along these lines. The fact that there are some hotels that have a number of calls and a lot of police service, and just there was questioning and wondering how to address this. And at the time, there weren't any ideas or awareness of kind of a way to truly address this. Well, Alpharetta has just officially addressed it, and they came out with a safe hotel ordinance. With that, what ended up happening is there was a first draft. The draft ended up being edited for a final. So in here is the red line version. So you see the original, and you see the red lines bringing it to the most up to date one. It passed with a thin margin, so it passed 4-3. So by no means was it unanimous. But what one of the main points the opposition had, and some of the comments I heard, was talking about in Alpharetta they didn't really have much of a hotel safety issue. And unfortunately, we do have some hotels that are absolutely using our public safety resources a lot, and to the point where it obviously costs the Roswell taxpayers money, and it doesn't create an incentive for hotel owners to make sure that their property is safe. Some things that I want to call out in this ordinance, I think a very important one, is if a hotel employee makes the call, that does not count towards the number. So there's no incentive for a hotel employee to not place a call. But if you have residents, if you have individuals staying there, whoever it might be, you have different calls or just to report something, that is a call. And for anybody that would like to see them, thanks to our police department, who's always very prepared and always on the spot with everything. There actually is some information by year, and some really good news and a good story to tell here is the number of calls has gone down greatly from 2018, of course, to 2019 year-to-date. We'll see where 2019 ends up. But 2018 was, for most hotels, higher than 2017. And something that I'll bring up is, if you look at the details of this ordinance, it's the number of calls divided by the number of rooms. So in a hotel with 100 rooms should have more calls than a hotel with 50 rooms, and the same goes the other direction. But so if we look at this as an example, we have, in 2018, we had the Atlanta hotel with 571 calls. We had the Holiday Inn Express with 39 calls. That's a large disparity, and you'll see throughout there's a lot where you have some hotels that have a lot, you have some that have a lot fewer. What you'll see in this ordinance is a tiered structure. I'll tell you right now, I feel it is very important to pass this. I feel taxpayers should not be taking taking a lot of these costs, and frankly, I feel we should be rewarding the hotels that do have the proper policies set up. But what I want to stress is this has percentages that were created by Alpharetta. By no means am I tied to these percentages saying this is the absolute right best percentage. So I think that's something that I'll ask you all to look at. Although I'd love support and a vote tonight, at the same time I wanted to bring it and just give everybody the opportunity to have a discussion here. What questions might exist for staff to take back, any questions for me in kind of my review of it. But I absolutely will be bringing this to the next committee meeting, assuming we decide not to move it forward tonight. But I did want to give the chance just for a public discussion tonight for any concerns, any questions, and anything we might have from the police department as well.
Councilmember Tyson.
Thank you. I don't know that I'm prepared to suggest that we move it forward, but I am prepared to make one comment and one suggestion, and that's the red line to Section 8. I have a significant problem, and I don't want them to weigh in tonight, but I'd like them to weigh in, when they come back, of rewarding hotel employees $200 for making calls. I think there's a lot of problems that come from something like that, and so that particular one kind of would be a non-starter for me. And then the rest of it, I really would like public safety to spend some time and determine whether this makes sense as written or what changes they'd like to see. I'd also really like to see our legal department weigh in on what we might need to change for our situation, which may or may not be different than Alpharetta.
Sure, I appreciate that feedback, and so I'll definitely want to make sure we have a detailed discussion with legal, with the police department, and I want to let you know when I do bring this to the next committee meeting, I'll have Section 8 deleted.
Councilmember Zapata.
So, yeah, I think it's an interesting initiative. And have you run the number on the higher example you gave us, how much revenue will bring based on Alpharetta today?
So the way this is structured, and this council has the ability to change this, the way it works is with there being 3 tiers, one that would be in the 3rd tier, which there's a couple different ways, you can get to that 3rd tier. And again, that's what we have to discuss more detailed with the police department sitting up here. Again, they are prepared for any questions, but I want to also give them time. This is a chance for us to kind of discuss, so legal and the police are prepared next time. But the way this is structured, we define what the 3 different tiers would be. And then if a hotel meets that 3rd tier, then there's a fee. And in this, that fee is $5,000. So that's how it's set up right here. Again, I absolutely do want to make sure we're customizing this.
Just to have a general idea of the amount of revenue that in this particular case, based on Alpharetta standards and the number of calls we receive from the highest number of calls that we receive from one of the hotels, how much money will bring?
5,000.
5,000.
Well, but he's wondering for how many hotels you're wondering?
No, per the top the top or the worst case scenario, $5,000
Per year.
That's
per
right.
year.
That's the way it's set up.
And so that's the way it's set up here. This council can decide, perhaps that's not enough, there should be adjustments. But what I will do is, so what I've got from the police department is the actual calls. So for a full year 2018, we'll look at it. And Olivia, what I'll be needing some help from you on is with this list of hotels, we need to find out the number of hotel rooms, just so that can give us an idea what has been the percentage for each of them, and that will give some more information to this council on seeing what are the right percentages for the right tiers.
Again, I think it's a great initiative because we'll make more accountable and responsible the hotels owners to the kind of guests that they will check in the hotel. So they will help to, when they feel that there's a consequence by bringing travel into the hotel that will require our public safety intervention, then they might be take more care of checking who is checking in the hotel. So I think it's worth to explore the concept, and it's very interesting.
And a concept I liked as well. So in addition to there's the fact that if they're getting an overly high amount of calls, it ends up being in reality the taxpayers are subsidizing that, and even the other hotels that are creating safer situations are subsidizing that as well, in the sense that they're all taxpayers. But so there's the money aspect of it, which is really the incentive, but also what a tier 3 hotel has. It's similar to what we did for a recent restaurant that was having a number of alcohol violations. So tier 3 hotels shall hire and maintain on the property at the owner's sole expense the presence of an off-duty officer with arresting authority between certain hours. So that's another example of just if it is creating an unsafe situation and they're in that tier 3, they're being required to do something that's going to help create a safer situation. Because I don't know if everyone in the council has chosen to get the daily police reports. So if you read those closely, I've definitely been, it definitely stands out just a number of the different things occurring at our hotels, at our hotels, and I think it is important that we're addressing this.
So how soon can you bring
So
it back?
my plan is actually this will be on the next committee item. So again, I'm going to bring some more information to make sure legal's prepared, the police department who's already prepared, but they'll be even more focused based on this feedback. I'll work with Livia to get the hotel room numbers so we could actually show what are the percentages. And my hope is what we're discussing is what are the right percentages, other factors, things we could change. And of course, we'll get that feedback from the police department and legal as well as I want it from all the elected officials. And I'm hoping at the next committee meeting, we'll be prepared to move something through the process.
Great, okay.
Any other comments or discussion on this item?
Question I have for Mr. Halsey is, so if at the next committee meeting this moves forward to council, this is an ordinance, so therefore there's the 2 readings?
Correct.
Okay.
When you say next committee meeting, you mean the next admin and public safety one?
No, so I actually,
ComDev Transportation.
I won't be here for that. I'm having bridge work done.
okay, then in
I will
that
not be able
case,
to be here.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
so then in that case, I'll look at having this come to the next public safety meeting.
Okay.
Councilmember Wilsey, just, did you have any thoughts, comments, ways I can improve this to get your support?
I would love to see feedback from the police department and what their recommendations are from staff.
Let it heal so I can do that.
That committee meeting would be July 9th for anybody that's interested. All right, any further discussion? If not, I'm going to have Mr. Skowski come up. We'll go ahead and finish out item number 7, which is Public Works. He has one item and some folks in the audience, if there's any additional questions that are needed. It's consideration for the mayor and or city administrator to sign a design-build agreement with Burns & McDonnell, standby contractor in the amount of $175,000 for the design phase of the Roswell Transfer Station Improvements and Expansion Project. Mr. Skowski.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
I believe it's evening.
So this evening, we wanted to run through this item, and before I even begin, I just wanted to clarify that in your packet, the item would be modified slightly in terms of the recommendation, which is to sign an agreement with Burns and McDonald as opposed to a design-build agreement. That edit did not come to our attention that was needed until after we submitted the package. And so the last paragraph that talks about design-build in the item would also be deleted when it comes to full council. The reason for that is we're interested in moving this project forward as quickly as possible, and Nick Pizzello's here with me tonight to answer any questions, as well as some representatives from Burns McDonald that I will introduce in a moment. The main reason for this is part of our capital program. However, our desire to move it forward has moved up in priority, and we would really like to get the design moving this year, which was planned for this year. We may want to move the construction up a little bit earlier into 2020. Currently, it is funded for replacement in 2021. The reasons for that are several, but the main thing is the transfer station has had a long and challenging life. Since 1999, when it was opened, it was running at or above its capacity very early on, because that's when we annexed East Roswell and then later some unincorporated North Fulton County. So many of you have been to the recycling center. They're about the same age. The transfer station has had a much rougher 20 years. It's currently in okay shape, but we have seen some things as we've done maintenance and inspections that have us concerned, so we'd like to be prepared with a replacement facility or upgrade, and that's really what this is about. The Burns and McDonald folks are one of our standby engineers, and I've got several representatives here tonight if we get into questions, but Matt Evans has been helping us with the design. They're in the back of the room, as well as Stacy Price, who runs their construction group, and Oko Buckle is their office manager here in town. Who's not here is Veronica Roof, who couldn't be with us today. She's been a tremendous help in our solid waste program for the last couple of years. And when we did our standby engineering selection, this project was one of our primary considerations in evaluating the proposals, and Burns & McDonald was the top-ranked firm in the solid waste category. So with that, in terms of what we're looking at doing, the transfer station is right here. This is Collaborative Way, and this is Hembry, and this is Maxwell. And the plan is to locate the replacement transfer station right behind the existing one. So it will not impact our existing operations during construction. That's one of the main challenges that we have. And it will provide additional capacity that we don't have now in the current facility. This is an overview rendering of basically our existing transfer stations roughly about here. You don't see it in this picture. It will be gone eventually, but we would be able to build the new one behind it without impacting the current operations before we demolish the old one. So again, want to thank Burns & McDonald for preparing the graphics for the presentation. This is a view of the new transfer station. A couple of main features. Number one, this is a much wider door, and this is a much larger facility. It's about double, 2.5 times, I think, the square footage, which is adequate for our long-term future and gives us a lot more room and breathing room for things that happen in the trash business that we'd like to have a little contingency for. This is basically what the transfer station does. We dump our red trucks in the inside and we haul away large trucks to the landfill. One other feature that we're going to incorporate is an improved customer drop-off area, which is where customers can bring oversized items any day of the week now, at least Monday through Friday, and we're doing the first Saturday of the month during summer. So this will be a much nicer facility. This was in here mostly because I wanted to emphasize the time of being prepared to make these improvements, and we were considering a design-build approach. That was ruled out mainly because of some legal restrictions in our standby contract. So we're going to go with a traditional design-build approach, design-bid-build approach, but try to accomplish many of those same objectives, which is get things done quickly and mainly get early cost information from contractors as soon as possible. So we have a very firm price when we come back to you. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thanks. So, couple of questions. When do you expect to reach maximum capacity of this new plant or new?
The new plant?
Yes.
That's a good question. We have not forecast that forward. At the current city growth rate, it would be probably beyond a 20-year life of the facility. So these facilities typically last about 20 years just because of the wear and tear on the concrete and the building itself. It's a harsh environment. This facility would provide adequate capacity for growth to probably beyond that 20-year lifespan. Because we're only growing at about 1.5%, Brian, I believe that's correct.
Okay, so my next question would be, is this going to somehow increase productivity?
Yes, sir.
By technology, by design, by, anything you will be able to increase productivity on this
Yes, sir. A couple of things about this. I scanned over this slide very quickly, but a couple of the points are mentioned here. So efficiency improvements to transfer station operations is exactly what you're asking about, and the additional space will help. The separation of the customer drop-off area and the tipping floor is a big advantage for us, and the larger door will allow us to drop off trucks, get them in and out through the transfer station quicker. Is that fair, Nick? I think you went to a couple of other transfer stations and felt those were the biggest things that would help us basically speed up throughput. And Burns and McDonald helped us a lot with planning that for the new station. So we should be able to move trucks through the station much quicker, and that will help tremendously. Last thing that's on here is automated scale house. So right now we have a person that operates or is usually present in the scale house, but it's not as automated as we would like. This would be an automated kind of key-in system that you use that'll help with automation.
Right.
Any other questions
I
on
have
this?
a very minor question, because I do use it. I couldn't tell the public dumpsters that you're setting up. Will those be down in the ground like they are now?
If I may, the design will definitely, this is just a rendering, it's just to show general spatial issues. But my preferred method would be a hybrid of what you see now. So it wouldn't be as high, it wouldn't be as low. Hopefully you could back right up to it with, say, a pickup truck, offload your items, and get you on down the road. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, I like the way it's done now, because not having a pickup truck, you're pulling something heavy out of your car, then a regular dumpster, you have to put that over your head to get in, and the way it is now, you just dump it over the top.
You don't want to have to put your arms over your head lifting things.
So it will have like a sort of ramp going down the container.
Great.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Any other?
So I just want to thank you, Nick, for the work you've done putting this together, and also thank Burns McDonald for what they've done so far. And if there's no other discussion, I'd move that we move it forward to the next
So we have a motion to sign the agreement with Burns and McDonald standby contractors for $175,000 for design. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, 3 seconds by
Well, you got a bunch.
Councilmember Zapata, I think, on this one. All in favor, raise your hand.
He's louder.
There you go. And it's unanimous, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
We'll move into the public safety police agenda. Agenda item number 2 is consideration for the city administrator to sign a sales agreement to retire K-9 Leva to its handler. And I think we have Deputy Chief Rivard is here to talk about this item.
Good evening. Yes, so our first item of consideration is to sign a sales agreement to retire K-9 Leva to her handler. So at this point in time, she's getting towards the end of her service. Also, her handler has been promoted at this point in time to sergeant, so he's no longer acting in a handler capacity. So in taking the cost effectiveness of trying to retrain her based on the number of years of service, we did a cost analysis. And so the purchase is, I believe, was $2,992 that the handler would reimburse the city for those last few years of service life that she would have, and that it is the most cost-effective option.
Any questions for, yes, sir, Councilmember Tyser?
Fully prepared to support this. I remember doing this about a year ago with another canine.
Yes.
And one of the things that I struggled a little bit then with was, we have an officer buying a dog, and we're going to make the officer come up with $3,000 to do it. Do we have leeway, Bob, to do what we need to with the number?
I had the same idea or thinking about it, and it would seem to me that figure would be the cost of a fully functioning police dog. If you're retiring Liva, you're going to get down to the rescue effort of it, which would be like $300.
When we get into the next item, the purchase and training of another dog is
I know.
$18,000, so.
Well,
it's-
I'm going to play Councilmember Palermo here and say they're not related. But I agree with Councilmember Heiser. That seems to be excessive. I understand that is the cost of the animal functioning as a police dog, but the animal functioning as, being rewarded for retirement and the officer being rewarded for taking care of it
Right.
seems excessive.
And
And I
I-
think we do have some leeway in setting that price.
I would agree. I think that the dog is served the city well. served the
Unless
community
Ryan's
well,
got
and
an
deserves
objection.
a good retirement.
And I'm not at all opposed to helping out with the officer and rewarding the officer in any way, but there are a couple of other considerations in it. The $2,992, what that comes from at that point in time is if you subtract out what the retraining cost would be for the dog, so versus the value, that's what's left over. In addition, the dog is purchased out of forfeited assets. So in order to remove a forfeited asset from the city, then it has to come back into a fair market value. So if we were to, in a sense, give the dog onto the officer, their budget considerations as far as how the forfeited asset process works and how we can redistribute those monies. So there'd have to be some shifting, and yes, definitely defer to Ryan on how that would all work out.
But we can work with Ryan about coming up with a fair market value.
So then the officer will be responsible for feeding the dog and,
Yes,
maintaining the dog
absolutely.
moving forward.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion for the consideration to allow this sale to be signed by the administrator?
Anybody have anything they want to add?
If Ryan can come up with a,
With a fair,
what is the law?
So,
And how do we get to that number? And is it possible to calculate it a different way?
the one thing I would want to check on is because it was purchased with forfeited assets, we would just need to verify that there's what the rules are in that respect. In general, when it comes to city property, city assets, the mayor and council action can decide to surplus anything, any way, any price they choose to, if it's a special circumstance. But we would need to go back and just double check what the federal law is on the forfeited asset funds. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to double check.
Okay.
If we could check on that. And
We could definitely have it by the next council meeting.
So should we motion to move it forward with the price to be determined at the council meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
that works.
So moved.
So I have
And
that.
can we also require that he bring the dog?
Whatever you want, ma'am.
Have a little retirement.
Especially since everybody's trying to save them some money. I think that's definitely not too much to ask, right?
So I think we had a so moved from Councilmember Tyser. Is there a second from Councilmember Wilsey? So we have a motion and a second to move this to the council meeting with the price to be determined.
Yeah.
All in favor? That's unanimous.
And quick question, what was the price on the previous dog?
It was about the same number, I remember that.
I do believe it wound up being just a little bit more because it had a little bit more of a service life, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we have to be kind of also consistent because we don't want to favor someone versus other.
So item number 3, Consideration for the use of confiscated assets for the purchase of a new police K-9 and associated training in the amount of $18,000 and a budget amendment in the amount of $18,000. Deputy Chief Barnes.
Absolutely. So as we kind of touched on just a little bit ago, so we will be losing one of our canines here shortly, and therefore we need to replace said canine. Captain Kyle Ratliff over here has done an immense amount of work into looking into different training areas, training venues, looking for a particular facility that works with what we're looking for in a canine, and also doing cost analysis on each of them, and came up with an excellent recommendation. And in doing so, to do the training, the lodging, and the per diem expenses for the handler to go out for the training, we're looking at approximately $18,000. And all of that, once again, would come out of the forfeited assets fund.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Councilmember Tice to approve item number 3. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous.
Get your dog.
Item number 4 is consideration of a budget amendment to apply $27,128.91 in propertyroom.com revenue towards purchases in the amount of $27,305 for 2 Zeus money counters for property and evidence, special investigations, and Unit 4 patrol, and a Genetec camera system upgrade from Vigilon. Deputy Chief Rivard.
Yes. As the agenda states, we have property evidence that was otherwise not claimed, surrendered, and at that point through court orders was converted into city use or disposal. And all that is sold on propertyroom.com, which has resulted in these revenues. And what we're looking to do is apply those revenues towards the purchases of items that actually are going to help in the property and evidence room, 2 of which would be money counters. We get in a large amounts of money sometimes, whether it's from evidence, from a burglary bust, or for drug investigations in particular. So when those large amounts of money come in, that's always a liability. It's also a lot of manpower, and officers counting, recounting, double counting, supervisors counting and signing off on it. So the money counters are very, very important in doing that. The other portion of that would be for an upgrade to the camera system from a Vigilon to all Genetec. Right now, we have 2 camera systems in our police department, between the police department and evidence. As we have been converting over to Genetec, we're on our last few of Vigilon cameras. And we would like to get away from having 2 different systems, be all on Genetec. In addition to that, a Vigilon is at a point where we would need to upgrade the server anyways. So rather than putting more money into a Vigilon, we would just like to move everything over to Genetec. So in taking the revenue that came in from propertyroom.com and moving that into the appropriate account to do that, then we would be able to fund the last little remaining bit out of the existing budget.
And Genetec is a system that the city is pretty much standardized on. That's what we're using in our municipal buildings and moving there also.
Right.
Any questions on this item, this budget amendment? I have a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wilsey to approve. Second by Councilmember Zapata. All in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 5 is consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with 10-8 Forensic Services, Inc. for on-call evidence collection forensic services. Deputy Chief Rivard.
In this particular item, what we have is in a situation in which we have a suspect that we have a search warrant, a court order at this point in time, for a blood draw on the individual. It could be from, say, a DUI case, a serious injury accident DUI, could be a homicide case in which we need to get DNA or any other samples. At this point in time, we are running into issues with the local hospitals. We used to bring these individuals up to North Fulton Hospital to do these blood draws. They are now refusing to do so. Unless the subject says, yes, by all means, I want to give you my blood, they feel that if the subject is denying that even with a court order, they will not do so. Our judge has tried contacting hospital administration and discussing it with them and explaining you have a court order, and they are still refusing to do so. At this point in time, again, Captain Ratliff, who is an excellent researcher, has found a company in which that this is in fact what they do, and they're already doing this for other agencies, and they would be on call for us. If I remember correctly, it's a 30-minute response time on call?
30 to 45 minutes.
30 to 45 minutes. So we obtain the warrant, we contact them, and they will be there in 30 to 45 minutes to take care of it. So it would cost less money in the end than taking them up to the hospital, not to mention the amount of hours that we're spending up there trying to get this accomplished and driving from other hospital to other hospital trying to find somebody to do it. We're looking to fund this because, to be quite honest with you, and trying to determine a budgetary impact, I can't give you a firm number, and the reason why is because at this point in time, DUI laws, state laws in between breath tests and blood tests have now drastically changed into the criminal procedure aspect, the processing. So we are going to see an increase. When we first started looking into this, this was going to be a very, very small amount of cases. It was mostly going to deal with homicide type DNA blood draws. But now we're going to need to be doing this for DUI cases as well. And this is all new to us. We have not had to rely so heavily on blood draws for DUI before. So for that being the case, just taking into account how many DUIs we've had, how many did consent to a test, plus warrants for a test, I can estimate a worst case scenario of potentially being around $10,000. That's a worst case scenario. I would guess it would be much lower than that. And it's all going to depend on the specifics of the case, which type of testing will be done, what type of testing is refused. I suspect people are going to refuse more for blood than they would have for breath. Certain circumstances, we can still get a warrant. Certain circumstances, we can't. So again, my worst case scenario best guess is 10,000. I do believe it's going to be less than that. Because of that, what we're requesting to do is fund it out of forfeited assets for the first year. Which we can do for a first-year trial run to see what the budget is going to look like. Any future years, though, once this becomes part of our operating, we will need to put in a budgetary request to move this into an operating expenditure.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thanks. Question. So today we have to pay the hospitals for that? So we already have a fund allocated for this service or cost. So we're not going to use the hospital anymore. So are we moving this fund to finance this new avenue, or how is going to be the...
Right, so this is what I was touching on with the changes in DUI laws. So what we have been doing is we had been paying the hospital, however the hospital is refusing, and it was difficult in doing so. Now with the changes in DUI laws, we will be soon starting to do many more blood tests than we have. So this is a new change that has come. So we have not been using the hospital that much. It was a few here and there. So when we first started investigating this, we were going to fit it all within our existing operating budget. But now with the changes in DUI case law, we are anticipating that this number is going to go up. And again, I can't guess as to how much at this time.
And is any way that could be find this person and with this money finance this service, or it's not legally possible to find the person and
I'm
charge?
sorry.
Find them before you convict them, and you take the blood to see if they're guilty or not.
Right.
Okay, so you're gonna say,
Councilmember Wilson.
Yeah, I was just curious, I guess, from a finance standpoint, if there are any issues of using the assets fund to fund and a service or an ongoing operating expense. It seems to me like, maybe we could find that $10,000 somewhere, either additionally allocated to operating or to find it somewhere.
I'll leave that to Ryan about whether you can or can't. There are restrictions on what you can use the forfeited assets funds for. And I'm not sure this fits within the definitions. I'd have to check that.
We can double check. I mean, I think that, I know there's some leeway with operating expenses. In terms of recurring items, that was your question?
Yes, it just seems to me like it's an ongoing expense that we need to be able to account for and forecast. And so using money that comes out of a one-time forfeited assets fund is probably not the best way to consider it.
Right, and I would say that definitely is true if it were a much larger dollar amount.
Sure.
Because,
right.
But I guess if you look at the trend in our history, being able to fund something of this magnitude shouldn't be that much of a stretch for the city, but yes, if it were, on the order of tens of thousands or hundred thousands, that would be a bigger concern.
And I think from the police department's standpoint, it wouldn't be an ongoing coming out of there, but this first year, they consider that as a one-time until they, almost like a pilot project to figure out what it's going to be.
Exactly.
Right.
In future years, it would certainly be ongoing at that point and wouldn't want to come out of there.
So, I don't know if this question is for Ryan as well. So is this a police cost or is a court service cost? Who should be responsible to cover this, the court service or the police department?
This is a police expense as part of the investigation, so it's something the city would have to pay for.
So it's not a court,
No,
the court order?
no.
Not until
It's
after.
part of, it's part of evidence gathering is what it
Okay.
is.
Perfect, clear, thanks.
Councilmember Tyser.
So the request in front of us right now is to move forward, the mayor and council, or mayor or city administrator to sign a contract with 10-8 Forensic Service for on-call collection of forensic services.
Yes.
And I would move to move that forward. Ryan, how you handle the accounting really is up to you all and not part of this motion. And I just see it as your ability to turn around, cases is going to be much greater. Not having to drive around, with a shortage of officers, I think this is well worthwhile. So with that, that's my motion.
So we have a motion to approve this item. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilson.
Then from now on, then we can work out where the money come from.
Separate issue that Ryan.
Ryan can work with the police department to see if these
Sure.
are the avenues to get the money
Sure.
and make it like an ongoing operational expense and
Sure. All in favor of moving this forward, raise your hand. That is unanimous, and I believe we're adjourned.
Good meeting. Thank
Well
you.
done.
You're welcome to put it in court if you want. I mean,